General Protocol Spaces, Banking on Freedom.
So, welcome to General Bull 30 of N is metric adoption, where adoption. We're just going to cover this. Came up recently with a good question from Callisti on Twitter, and he was asking, what's it going to take? Where's adoption going to happen? When does adoption happen? Those kind of questions. What is it that's going to take off? And then, of course, that leads into a discussion of, well, what does it mean? How do you measure adoption? What is adoption? And how do you drive it? How do you measure it? And so forth. So thought we'd get into that a little bit today and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah. So this is a thing that predates the BCH fork all the way back to the very beginning of Bitcoin, which is okay. So we got this cool new network, this new money, and how do we know? Like, is there some kind of way for us to know that people are using it, aka adoption? And then after the BCH fork, in 2017, that basically intensified because we became narrow-minded on this. Well, not narrow-minded. Well, I would say focused on this. Aside from all other kinds of use cases, so we hammer the point: adoption, adoption, adoption. But what is adoption? And here we are going to talk a bit about it, about this thing that everyone in BCH and a bunch of other chains keeps talking about, but it has manifested itself in many different ways, and some are more, in my opinion, legit than others.
Right. Let's go back to one of the old conversations from, like 10 years ago, because this isn't a new conversation, as you said, for crypto or Bitcoin or anything. But one of the most famous discussions was the supposed fidelity problem, right? You want to tell us a little bit of the quick history of the fidelity problem, what that meant, and then what it actually looked like in real life, like for example with Steam or Microsoft and so forth.
Oh yeah, and so that is a old question that I think the fidelity problem touches many different aspects of this, not just traditionally it has been used in the context of discussing scaling, like, oh, what happens if we don't scale, but it also touch. So here it goes. The question is like this. Apparently this, I think it was a post on the on Bitcoin Talk. Correct me if I'm right. If I'm wrong, was it on Bitcoin Talk? Um,
It probably was. That was the only
yeah,
place people talked
for
like
for a
at that
very long
time.
time. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean it could be on Reddit. I don't know. But yeah, it was a post on Bitcoin Talk that came up in the early days of the Bitcoin scaling debate, on whether we should raise the max block size, when do we raise it, how much do we raise it, etc., etc. Um, so it was a story. To this date, I don't think we ever got any actual confirmation on whether that is true. But it was a story about, apparently, Fidelity, as many of you might know, is a big American financial firm that trades packages, securities, among many other things. So apparently, they looked into using Bitcoin to facilitate their trades. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether in that story they were thinking of just using Bitcoin as money, or using it as a timestamp machine, or whatever else they were thinking of using. And apparently they looked into it pretty seriously, and after some serious evaluation, came to the conclusion that the Bitcoin block size limit was too small and it will not suit their needs, and so they moved on. Um, so in the scaling debate, this was primarily used as an example on what could happen if we don't raise the max block size. Like if we don't raise it, very big players that could bring in a lot, that could bring in a lot of fame and value, like Fidelity, will look at their expectations and decide that they are not going to use it. So that's why, even without any pressing need, remember this was the early days of the scaling debate, um, we should raise the max block size. And so that was in the scaling context. But I believe this story, aside from its usual context, also brings us some additional questions. Like, okay, so what exactly was Fidelity using for? I think in that story, nobody mentioned that Fidelity is just going to buy a lot of Bitcoin and start
Right.
using it as
Right.
liquidity or whatever. Hmm. Well, maybe they were trying to use the Omni protocol to do some internal accounting because Bitcoin was so cheap, right? And there were some
Maybe.
free there were back then there were free block space to be had around, and maybe they want to use that, and they just want to put their entire internal accounting on Bitcoin for free or something like that. Or I don't know, maybe something else. So what
Whoever
exactly?
fabricated the story didn't bother with the details of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if it's real, right? Let's just assume that it's real. It brings us a very important question of okay, so what exactly would be the use case that Fidelity puts on Bitcoin in order for it to be deemed adoption? Or adoption here could even be, anything desirable. And that is a big question, and in my opinion, that is no less of a question than the scaling question of when, how, whether to raise max block size. This is a very legit question. Like, what are we looking to see when we talk about adoption? What are we hoping to see?
Right. Yeah, and that gets into the questions of is it being used? Is it being adopted? If it's custodially, if it's being used custodially on Robinhood or like Fidelity, if they're just using it, and if it's an ETF, like is that actual adoption or not? Yeah, that's one of the angles.
If Elon Musk buys all the bitcoins, is that adoption? I don't know.
Right, is that adoption? So there's yeah, that's one custodian use versus non-custodial usages, like where's adoption in there. um, then there's another angle, which is the standard metrics, which people often bring up, right? Like, make sure I don't miss any here. There's transactions per second, let's just say transaction, like number of transactions, and then the size of total size of transactions. That's one that people bring up. The fees paid for transactions. What are some of the others? There's right locations, like where it's being used, how it's being used, the use case, like what use case is it in? Is that a meaningful use case? Then there's also the old question of tokens versus money. Like, if in the extreme case, if your network is being used exclusively to throw tokens around and do whatever with tokens, but actually the money part of it is not being used, is that adoption? um, Retail, like number of accepting, on the demand, on the supply side, the number of merchants who are accepting it, is that a reasonable metric? And then on the demand side, the number of users who want to spend it, is that a reasonable metric? Like, how do all these fit together? Did I miss any big ones there?
Let's just go with this. We got plenty.
Yeah, we got a lot. And let me welcome Jomar. Are you there? Can I get a mic check?
Hello.
Hey, hey, it's good to have you on here. So,
Hey.
speaking of retail and adoption, this is one of the best people in the world to talk to. So, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here as well.
All right. I've invited a few other people onto the stage as well. Bruno, you want to get a mic check real quick?
Hello everyone, first time I get this live. Usually I have to listen to it later on YouTube.
Yo, welcome. We tried a different
Yeah.
time zone today. See if we can get the Americas in there. Ooh, Rama has just joined too. Another great person to talk to about real world adoption. Awesome. I'll see if I can get him to join us in here. All right, where should we start? You name what's the okay? Let's start with on Twitter. I posted a link in the thread of this talk to Goodhart's law. This is a very famous law for anyone who deals with data processing, data management, monitoring, statistics, that kind of stuff. So I'll just read it real quick. But this is the law that says any observed statistical regularity will tend to collapse once pressure is placed upon it for control purposes. And in more standard language, it's when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So this is a real catch 22, right? Like once you find something that's a good way to measure adoption and you start to measure it, it's probably going to be bad as a measure because it gets contorted and it becomes an unreliable marker anymore. But we're
Yeah.
not to that point yet, right? We need to get all these things really running, and then we'll have that problem later. So at this point in time, where crypto has really achieved not a whole lot of adoption on a large scale at all, what is it that are the good measures? Like, what's the pros and cons of these basics? Like transactions per second, number of
So,
transactions.
so
What does that mean?
I would want to expand on Goodhart's law a bit, and the reason why metrics lose their effectiveness and are manipulated or contorted whenever they become a target, is because as more and more people use that target for their own purposes, like to inform their investments or to inform their business decisions and so on and so forth. Eventually there comes to be a point where the cost of manipulating that metric, which usually remains static, um, becomes lower than the perceived benefit for who is manipulating the metric, the perceived benefit of the downstream effects from that manipulation. Um, so, for example, this is very common in crypto. I would just jump into it in terms of transaction count. People like to use transaction count as a metric of adoption because it's very easy. It's very directly observable. It's a one shot global metric that is universal, so it's very easy to observe, and so people like that it's very universal and easy to observe, and and it's also very intuitive, right? If you buy a cup of coffee, then you make a transaction, so obviously more transactions is more cups of coffee bought. But then you start to use it to inform investments. um, yeah, that means the chain with more transactions will have more adoption, and hence I should buy that coin. And so you very quickly get to the point that okay, so if the transaction is cheap, if the transactions are cheap, or even in chains where the transactions are expensive, um, and if I pump the transaction numbers and I think I could get more people to buy my coin, maybe I should do it. And that's how you get ridiculous stuff like those seen in BSB, for example, and in a slightly more distant memory, I don't know if anyone remember it. uh Ripple once did that and pumped their transactions number in a very short time period to something ridiculous like 10,000 transactions per second for I don't know a couple of weeks or something. And then afterwards, it got so bad that they deleted their whole chain history, and nobody can find that anymore.
That didn't happen.
And like it just fell into a hole, and nobody can find it from then on. So history restarted. Uh, but Yeah, so if that is a prime example. Like, okay, if I drop $5,000 into this to pump all the numbers up, maybe people would buy my coin, and that would get me way more than $5,000. So it's totally worth it. And then the trick is used a few times until people no longer trust transaction count as a metric. So that became a tragedy.
Another way to frame these types of metrics from my perspective is it's the cargo cult. And if people aren't familiar with the cargo cult, you can go look it up. But it's basically where, regardless of what are the actual history behind the idea of cargo cult is, the basic idea is you saw something that was amazing and you reproduce it in order to reproduce that great history and bring back the great history. But what you're doing is just, the surface. You're just reproducing the shape of whatever it was and not the actual thing that led to it. So yeah, so you do tons of transactions and you pretend that that's somehow commerce, and it's like, wait, what are you doing? That doesn't mean anything. Who are you tricking? Like, are you trying to convince somebody of something?
It's a classical case of mistaking correlation for causation.
Right.
Bruno.
Right. Okay, so that's and on the same wavelength as that, there's a block size, right? Like maximizing block size. Hey, sorry, Bruno. Go ahead, man. You can just talk anytime. Just go for it.
So I don't know. I have never been to Townsville, but I would guess Bitcoin Jason would know what adoption feels like. And another thing I've thought is if you're digging for a metric, it's maybe because adoption is not really happening, and you're digging to to find something. But I don't know. I think Bitcoin Jason would be a guy that tells us how it feels like, if it's really happening, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And we can talk to that. So General Protocols has more than once been to Townsville and spent for travelers, a significant amount of time there, like over a week, 2 weeks at a time. And so we can definitely speak to that. And we'll say a little bit about that when we get to local adoption and that kind of thing. Thanks, Bruno. So going on the same point of these reversals of cause and effect, putting the cart before the horse. I think block size is another one of those where it's like, hey, we have giant blocks that are full of transactions. It's fundamentally the same thing, right? If you want to prove, like in some kind of stress test, that you can handle things, that's one thing, but I don't think it tricks anyone or convinces anyone to just have giant blocks. Like, okay, what's in those blocks? What's actually going on in there? How many people are using that? Fair? And I don't think there's any argument there, right?
Bruno.
Anybody, yeah.
You can just talk. I think you continue to raise this end.
I think.
Well, I've seen on Twitter or X a few days ago some guy like begging people on Bitcoin to do something like shitcoins or oracles, whatever, just to make the mining more profitable because it is in really low levels right now. So like speaking to what's going into the blocks,
Okay. Yeah. What goes into it is almost certainly more important than just the number of things going on, or both, right? The kind of things going on and how much of it is going on. That whole combo is important. Yeah, Jomar, you don't need to raise your hand, you guys. Just speak up.
Yeah. I think we all know defining like what adoption is a very complex and subject, and I think many blockchain communities are taking advantage of this ambiguity about what adoption really means by like just inflating certain metrics that are convenient to them. I cite this trend now of airdrops, for example. Like there's like a lot of airdrops everywhere, and and people who like mostly I think venture capitalists who are pumping a lot of money into certain networks. And many of the projects in these networks are just giving away tokens so that they will have a lot of users, and then they will assemble communities around in order to like demonstrate that there is some kind of adoption for the networks. And yeah, this just one example of how many in this space are taking advantage of like the difficulty of defining what adoption really is. Um, for the kind of like the experience we have with the adoption work we are doing, um, I'm coming to the conclusion that I think the one of the better measures I think of adoption is if we can measure the value that users of Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Cash focused products get uh, from using it. Like I always emphasize like translating the cost savings in payment processing to um, bringing down the cost of products and services. If we can measure the savings, if we can measure also like the efficiency, the time efficiency, then probably that's a closer to an ideal measure. So measuring the value that our users get when they use Bitcoin Cash or any Bitcoin Cash focused product.
That's a great one. I've been taking notes here in the background. Yeah, the savings, kind of the opportunity cost, right? Like, what are you losing by not using crypto? What benefits could you be getting as a business? And especially, I think those are meaningful from a business perspective because consumers are much less sensitive to those type of cost issues, right? Because there's less impact on you as a user for a single credit card transaction versus a business that's accepting thousands and thousands of credit card transactions. Those economies of scale actually matter, right? And the business starts to care about it. And the businesses tend to be more rational about decisions anyway. Not perfectly rational, but more rational about them. Yeah, that's a good one. So like savings versus alternative or opportunity cost.
Well, I
Yeah.
think a general problem that at
Oh,
least
hey, Ramit.
I've observed. Hey, hi. I just wanted to mention regarding what Jomar just said, which is, yeah, the airdrops and things does work, building the initial community. But unfortunately, most of the projects out there don't really do anything, right? So they just launch a token or something like that. And then, yes, they do manage to drive up a community, but then they lose it immediately afterwards. So if you're just doing airdrops, then all these users that are looking for airdrops are jumping from one project to the other. And if you do not build anything around your coin, or if there's no use case for it, then I think you'll end up losing that entire community.
I mean, this is not meant as a step for anyone, but you could totally do something afterwards, right? You could just
Yes, but
take
they don't. That's what I'm saying.
no. See, you could take the stash that you gave yourself earlier for free,
Mhm.
and take that stash and burn it, and tell people very loudly that you have burned those tokens, and hope that they will buy more of your tokens. That's what you do, right? Sorry.
Token
Yeah, but then
numbers.
they end up not building anything. That was the point that I was
Yeah.
trying to make. And I think if enough educational material is out there to teach people that it's not just about launching a coin and then letting it be a tradable asset, but actually there are use cases that you can build around it. I think that's where people tend to fail. As much as I've attended meetups and workshop and conferences and all of these things. Most of them fail to cross that path. They just get up to the point where they understand that okay, they can launch a token or whatever on any chain, and then it just stops there. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
the
that's
education.
the phrase cheap lightning is on here, and the phrase we always use probably came from him. I don't know, or it came from TV or something, a meme. It's like, okay, you hear something like something airdrop, and then and then what? Like, what are you actually doing with it? And this is a similar issue to when people talk about exchange swaps between chains. They're like, swaps between chains is the future, and it's like, really? So I went from BCH to this other chain, and then like, what am I doing with
Yeah,
it
and
now?
then
Like,
what?
what how does this economy work? Yeah, so it's like economy, right? There's got to be something going on. So how do you measure that? Yeah, I wrote a
Yeah,
bunch of things on Twitter here. Block size, number of airdrops, which you guys brought up. Like, is that a good metric? I think we can just say no. And maybe it's a useful technique, but then you have to have the and then after it, right? Supply, number of accepting merchants, and demand, number of users, and kind of the
No!
quality of users.
You could do something even better with it.
Oh no.
You airdrop those tokens, and then you airdrop some other tokens onto those tokens, and then you make another token, and then you airdrop onto those tokens.
So
You
you're
could go on
fired from
endlessly.
GP. You're fired from GP, but you're probably going to get hired somewhere else. So it's all going to balance out. So let's get into that one. Since we have you guys here, this will be amazing. So, what are the weaknesses and strengths of this very famous number, which has in the BCH community has come to have a lot of skepticism around it? Right, the supply, the number of accepting merchants. What I could say what I think is the weakness, but why don't you guys tell me, like, what are the strengths and weaknesses of that metric, the number of accepting merchants?
Yeah, I think that's something that we think about a lot. um, I always emphasize in my team that onboarding merchants is just like one of the uh, important. It's important. It's an important aspect, but it's just one side of it. And there's actually a risk in onboarding a lot of merchants, and then later on there's no like follow up on the demand side, like no people are spending, no one is spending on these merchants. So um, it is a metric, but at the same time, in a way, it's like the airdrops. It has to have a proper follow up, um, and that's why we follow like multiple strategies, approaches. Um, Onboarding is one, onboarding of merchants, and then immediately like forming or organizing a community or like a grassroots organization that will support the initial growth of this, the number of merchants, in order to support it. But just like the number of merchants alone, it's it can be faked. So that's one. It can be faked, and it can be a net negative later on if there's no proper follow up.
If there's no follow up, and then the demand point, right,
Yeah, yeah.
is
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to build. That's the tricky thing about what we do, because we need to build both sides, the supply and the demand side. So yeah, it's pretty challenging. So if you just build one side and not the other, then it becomes useless and even like a problematic. It becomes a burden later on if the other side of it is not also built alongside it.
If you read the white paper, you see that Satoshi wanted to create Bitcoin. I don't know, seems to me in the first place for online payments. And I think, for example, just prompt.cash has a online payment system available. I know Petaka has one in the works, but was that like a mistake to prioritize brick and mortar before online payments, like shopping online? I see like uh, Bitcoin Cash accepting stores, like Bitcoin Cash T-shirts and things like this, and they have PayPal there. I was like, what's up with this? You know?
No,
Oh,
I don't think it's a mistake. I think it just speaks to, so when you get into online anything, the the impact of network effects becomes even stronger, right? Because when you do things locally, right, people are limited by geography. There's the people who live there. But when you get into online, I mean, there's a reason there's only like four global major retail companies, right? And in some places, much less. It's just that the network effects are incredibly powerful. And as I was responding to Callisti in his Twitter thread recently, um, anything, and this is something that Uname has pushed so many times. When you start some kind of activity that requires a network effect, some kind of competition that requires a network effect, you're competing against some of the strongest network effects that have ever existed in history, right? Amazon, Walmart, these companies that do everything online, Spotify, whatever. So getting those companies to start using Bitcoin is a really hard deal, right? Because they have to do a global infrastructure for it. And so this was one of the horrible tragedies of the past where Microsoft and Steam, and I'm sure other companies were starting to accept Bitcoin, and then it all fell apart due to history, which we won't get into. So no, I don't think that's a mistake. I think it's just that every every particular thing that you try to do is going to have its own challenges. And the challenge of online payments is that you're dealing with absolutely massive network effects, and you have to be able to deal with huge economies. So it's just a different beast than local. I think they're just two different things. I don't think there's a mistake. We got to do
technically,
everything.
sorry, technically, the payments in brick and mortar shops are online, so it requires it's payments through the internet. It's just that, yeah, it's geographically bound, and I think it's a good point that Emergent brings up that when you target first this online marketplaces like the big online retailers, it's they have less motivation to adopt, like for example, Bitcoin Cash payments. They're more likely going to go with a payment processor, or like in the case of Binance Pay, for example, it's just a lot easier for them to do that. Um, so yeah, whichever way you choose, there's like you're going against the tide in a way. It's yeah, we just have to like experiment what works. And for Paytaka, for example, um, we what we aim to do is like demonstrate in like smaller markets or in smaller geographical regions, demonstrate uh, like a value proposition like that can entice the people to use Bitcoin Cash, and then build services, and then um, it's like constructing like a mini economy where you demonstrate the value of using Bitcoin Cash, and then scaling this uh, to larger geographic regions. Of course, it's an experiment, so we are learning a lot along the way. But yeah, it's all challenges, whichever way you look at it.
So one of the famous things, right, is when you're trying to disrupt an existing industry, which here, like we're talking about payments and local commerce. When you're trying to disrupt, you better be 10x as good, right? If you really want to break in and make a difference and start to vacuum people towards your solution, which disrupts the existing network effects. What is it that has made it hard so that that it just doesn't happen automatically. What is it? Why is it that it's not so the the savings versus the alternatives, like you were saying? Why is it not so obvious that people just are, the merchants are just flooding into it, trying to get users to use it and so forth? What are the difficulties in finding that 10x?
Um, I don't necessarily agree that you have to be like 10x better. You could it could work with just 2x, 3x better. I think the one important factor in like spreading this the usage is marketing and the network and changing people's perception about your product, about the product. Um, yeah, it doesn't have like it doesn't have to be like to be a lot better than what's out there. We really need to market it, to make it palatable, to make it appealing to the people. Because, for example, um, in the context of the Philippine market, cryptocurrency in general has like a negative image. Like the people don't see it like they don't even see it as a payment currency. Many, even the youngsters here, they see opportunities for earning, like trading, like this airdrops hype lately, uh, and they don't see the value of it being used for payments. So there is you have to overcome that. So marketing is going to play a very important role. You have to have a better product, maybe slightly better, 2x, 3x. That should be enough. And then you then have to position your product in a way that puts it in a very attractive or in a very positive light, so that you get a snowball effect, um, slowly growing the user base, and then yeah, creating a good image, and then of course make sure that that the UX doesn't is not terrible. It's at least comparable to existing solutions. But yeah, it's the marketing side of it is going to be very critical in the execution.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good point. I put that on my list here that I'm keeping. The awareness is one, just whether it's good or bad, and then the quality of that awareness, the positive image or negative image of whatever, of Bitcoin Cash. What do people actually think of it? So not only do they know about it, but do they think of it in terms of, oh, I can use that instead of just as a trading type of vehicle. Okay, that's a great one. Ramen, did you have anything on this
Yeah, I
this
think
supply versus demand topic?
yes. I think one of the main focus, at least, that we have been looking at is incentive. I don't think there is an incentive to actually use for example, Bitcoin Cash for payments. Like, of course, from our point of view, there might be incentives, right? I'm talking from a ordinary person's point of view. They just don't have any incentive to start using any crypto platforms in their day-to-day lives for regular commerce. Yeah, I think working on those uh, helps a lot. Building incentive models into the platforms actually help gain momentum, and if it can be pushed in a way where, hey, if you use this, you also get this as an incentive. I think that definitely acts as a push to get people to start using um, crypto in their day-to-day life. Um, you know Regardless of whether there's demand or supply, there are other hurdles that pose as a threat for us right now. I think one of the things that I've generally come across whenever we have tried to onboard merchants is that they just, of course, one thing that they definitely ask is who's going to make the payment with this, right? Fine, I'm going to accept it, but who's actually going to make a payment? So that is where incentive kind of acts up. Like, there is no incentive for somebody to actually pick up a crypto wallet and make a payment compared to their regular fiat wallet. I think, yeah, that's one place I think most of us are not focusing on. So yeah, I tend to keep that high on my list.
That's great. I have a follow up question to that. So, my personal experience, right, is one of those one way street things where it's very, very hard to go back. After I learned how to use Bitcoin back in the day, and today, what I called Bitcoin is Bitcoin Cash. But after I learned how to use it, I was totally hooked, and I was like, "This is amazing! I have full control. This is actually in my control. I don't have to ask anybody for anything." And
Yeah.
I'm the master of things here, and it's also, of course, extremely cheap. I can send money anywhere in the world anytime. It basically costs nothing, and so forth. I can achieve privacy with it, and so forth, all kinds of benefits. But what you're saying about incentives, can I take that as to mean the incentive to get over that wall from doing your day-to-day life in fiat and whatever local fiat tools you have, and then getting over this kind of hump, this learning curve where you've got to get into it, and once you get into it, you think people will have that same kind of, hey, this is good for me, I like this? Or do you think just the base usage of it requires some incentives?
Well, the initial network effects need that, because generally humans tend to either follow other people or imitate other people. So unless every other person around you is using crypto, you're also not going to use crypto, right? So the incentive has to exist until people start seeing that, okay, others around me are also using crypto. I think that's a pretty big point that people maybe subconsciously tend to follow up on. Uh, yeah, I don't. It is a continuous effort. I would say it's not just an initial thing. There, I don't know what the threshold is, but there definitely is a threshold. Because if you tend to see any other product out there, that also tends to follow that the certain line, which is we're not going to use this product unless there is a certain amount of people around me either talking about it or using it. Um, the same thing works with following someone, like for example social media profile, right? If there's a new product, however good it is, very few people actually start following it organically in the beginning,
Mhm.
right? Every other person tend to follow others if every other person around them is also following
Yes.
that person. The same thing applies for this as well. Is that majority of the people want to follow others, not lead. Very few people would lead, but the incentive has to be there to get them to start following. Until everybody else is following, then you can just slowly start to remove those incentives, and then you just have an economy where that's naturally taking place.
Right. And I know a number of, I mean, it's probably totally standard practice these days, right? That people realize, like you said, people like to follow. It's just easier. It's very hard. I mean, you can't expect everybody to be evaluating every single product and every single market that they're involved in or that they touch.
Yes.
So there's some amount of just following. So I know the standard marketing, right, is social media. You look for influencers. That's why they're called influencers. Um, and I'm
Yes.
sure that's standard for traditional company marketing. So maybe that's another metric is how many influencers and the size and weight and reach of influencers who are using Bitcoin Cash and talking about it. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes. Um, Yeah, definitely. I think the number of people talking definitely helps. I think that's what BCH kind of lacks, right? There aren't that many people talking about Bitcoin Cash. So, of course, naturally, you're not going to have that network effect either. So, if we can get to a position where we do have enough people who have a good amount of following, start to talk about that, I think that plays a pretty big role. But apart from that, I think another issue that does play into this is the price volatility. I know we know that some people might say that's a good thing, some people might say that's a bad thing. But just thinking from a merchant's point of view, right? Um, if it is unstable, if whatever amount that they're receiving is unstable, especially merchants or businesses that work on constant cash flow, they cannot have their capital keep going up and down constantly. I think that might also hinder some merchants to look at that as a viable method to accept payments. So I guess that's why stable coins kind of take precedence over other coins, because at least it tends to hold some value, right? Um, yeah, maybe that could be an entry point as well, where let's say to start getting involved with BCH, there's a stable coin um, that people can start using on BCH, and every time they're actually using or getting into the system, it's adding more and more value until it gathers enough value where the price isn't changing that much anymore. Then making that switch is even more easier. Um,
That
that's what
I mean, not to pour cold water in this, but this is basically like the last generation meme of crypto. People were the period when people were spawning stablecoins left and right was like 6 months ago, and we gotta think better about what we're doing right here. It's not we're now past the era when just spawning a stablecoin would just get us there without any additional effort.
So I have a kind of evidence based. It's not a huge amount of evidence, but from what I have heard and what I have seen, response to this issue of volatility, which is, I mean, we made AnyHedge, right? General protocols. We made the AnyHedge protocol and then BCH Bull fundamentally around the question of volatility. But when I actually look at what's happening in Townsville, and when I talk to the people there, and also my experience with the people in Japan that I know who have done merchants accepting it, the standard response is that you receive BCH, but when you start receiving crypto BCH for payments, it's not 99% of your sales, so it's not that big a deal. It doesn't really matter in terms of the volatility. It's like a tiny percent of your sales initially, right? That's how anything is. And
Mhm.
so when it initially starts, the volatility is not actually that big of a deal, and they don't actually care that much. And as a matter,
That's
and
what we
the
found. Yeah.
opposite is true. That like in Townsville, what Jason and Noel have said is that merchants who accept it, they are offered this underwriting service where it's like, okay, just show us your receipts at the end of the month, and we'll switch that to Australian dollars at the time of the price at the time that you receive the payment, so that you have absolutely zero volatility. And they don't use it. They're just like, no, I like this. I just want to take it. And
Yeah.
so, because it starts as a tiny percent, the volatility actually is not that big of their concern. It's actually a bigger concern, right? Is like tax issues and that kind of
Oh
question.
yes, definitely. I
Tax.
think we have example of both. For example, Townsville would be an example where people don't really care about volatility that much. But out of the hundreds of merchants that we have onboarded in India, one of the primary concerns, of course, apart from the regulations, was the volatility that at least we saw. Three main issues is regulations, volatility, and the lack of demand. This is what we saw.
So
Of course, we try to solve one by one, but there are some things that we just can't solve. For example, the taxes. We just can't solve it. Like, we cannot change that unless we get to a point where we are big enough and we can, I know we're lobbying or something like that. It just doesn't work, right?
so
Yeah.
So the other thing about this is that there is definitely there is actually a genuine need for a stable for like a stabilized solution out there, so there are stable coins that genuinely have a lot of adoption. But I think a good way to gauge whether a merchant, unless the merchant is a diehard BCH fan, of course, in which case, welcome. But if he's not, then the way to gauge whether his concern about stability of received funds is genuine or just theoretical is whether he went ahead and started accepting USDT and USDC, right? Because if his demand is so great for stability that he just wants to take USDT, then we have a legitimate case to say, okay, how can we convert him from taking this pseudo fake crypto USDT to real crypto and do better things. But if he's not, then maybe his concern is something else, and this is just something that, okay, he thought, he gave it a little bit of thought, and this is what he came up with, right? I mean, not to downplay the issue a lot, but this is one way to gauge it.
Yeah, I guess products like AnyHedge has kind of solved the just the aspect of stability, right? But then it still has to fix the cash flow that I mentioned for a
Yes,
business.
yes,
They
yes,
need
of course.
stability, right, when they receive it. But then in order to maybe get more resources to continue running their business or something like that, they need to be able to use it immediately as well,
Yes,
or even a day or
correct,
two later, whatever, right? I
correct.
guess that is still missing
Yeah,
from our point of things.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if we
and
can fix that, then yes, we can build products, we can build services around that make it even more easier for businesses to start accepting. I think that would be a big push. Yeah.
yeah, you need either the longer supply chain to accept it, or you need better on ramps and off ramps. Yes.
All right, let me ask a different question. The opposite side of all this using it stuff. This is one that Uname wrote down in our internal discussion. Is how much and for how long are people just holding it, hodling it, right? Is that what's the strength and weakness of that as a measure? Hey Bruno, you have your hand up for a really long time. I'm not sure. You can just speak up at any time, man. You don't need to raise your hand if you want to talk. Did you want to say something?
No, actually, I put my hand down right after you said I don't need it.
Oh, it's
I
probably
just was
Twitter. Yeah.
reacting to other things there. But I would
Okay.
like to
Yeah.
say something about this. For example, there's a demographic that don't care about like Instagram influencer or things like this. For example, my uncle, he's gonna be 60 years old soon, and he has a drugstore chain for pets, and that thing sells. And I really want to onboard him, and I spoke to him about Bitcoin Cash a few times. And the objections he presented was, first of all, he has this preconception that it is really hard, super technical. And I explained to him that a bank app is more difficult than use Bitcoin Cash, for example, because you need to send a photo, you need to send documents, you have to wait for the bank approval to get your account, blah, 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 and all this. And the easy part that he already does in the bank app is what he is going to do in the Bitcoin Cash wallet. So there's this preconception that, oh no, that's too technical for me, it's hard. I'm from another generation, so so I have to break that down. And the other thing is the tangible thing. Like he told me, I can go in the bank and get a dollar bill in my hands. How can I do this with crypto?
For
So
now.
even yeah, so like even like, oh, he does transactions with his bank app every day, and it's all digital. Most of the things he does is digital in the bank app, just like he would do with Bitcoin Cash. But he knows he can go in the bank and grab a dollar bill. So he needs this tangible aspect, even most things being digital. So education for especially to this demographic that has more money and owns the businesses, it's really important for more adoption, I think.
That sounds like the same thing Jomar was saying, right? The awareness and perception. Have you found that the perception of business owners has started out as, hey, this is too complicated for me, before they actually tried it?
Um, Actually, for we also encounter that kind of demographics, and maybe our experience is different. I'm regarding this aspect about education. Like, I don't think it's practical to emphasize like educating each and every merchant, for example, that we onboard, or each and every potential BCH user. many of these people, at least in our experience, they will use something because they see others using it, especially others that they look up to, like as an authority or as an influencer. And if they see that and they see in general a positive image about it, even if they don't understand it, they will use it. That's like our working principle now. Like that's why we are engaged in all this public activities and then getting involved in even government initiatives. So we are pretty active in working with government agencies. In fact, we get invited to events that they organize, and we see that slowly the perception of people about Paytaka and Bitcoin Cash is changing. Like, oh, they were present in this particular event organized by uh, some government agency or some nonprofit organization. So that changes their perception. And although, of course, it's a good thing if we can educate each and everyone, but it's for us, it's less of a goal. For us, it's shaping the perception, which is not necessarily like educating everyone. It's like there are important touch points that you have to get into in order to create this positive perception.
All right. And let me yeah, okay, let's if we can, let's go to that other question that I was asking. So obviously all the merchant supply, demand, and adoption is a ton of hard work. Appreciate so much what you guys are doing in India, Ramit, and in Philippines, Jomar, and in Australia, those guys, and other places too. Everybody's working on it in different ways. But let's go to this other question, which I'm interested in because I don't actually know. Right, this is kind of a gray area of how important is it as a metric. There's measures of how much money is sitting in one place in a wallet for a long time. People are hodling it. They're not running around spending it. They're saving it because they think it's going to be worth a lot in the future. How important is that as a measure, right? Like fundamentally NGU, like how important is number go up kind of
Yeah, I think
ability?
I might have a slightly different perspective as to how the market has turned out here, right? I think that might not be the best idea. Um, if everybody is being taught that, hey, you just have to hold on to this, and the price will just keep going up, and then eventually you can either sell it or eventually you'll be able to just use that when the entire industry is made it available for you to do so. So what ended up happening here is, yes, everybody bought into that, right? Most of the Indians bought into the idea that crypto is just an investment asset that you hold on to. So the exchanges just removed the option to deposit or withdraw crypto. So if there is no using crypto, all that the Indian traders are
Holy
doing now
shit.
is depositing INR, purchasing crypto, right? So how does it matter, right? Like
With
if you're just
quotes, like
hodling, how does it
purchasing with
matter if
quotes,
you're
right?
yeah. So if you're just hodling, how does it matter if you're hodling in your custodial wallet or non-custodial wallet? Unless it's hacked, then it's bad, right? But if it's not, then there's no difference. It doesn't matter. You're not really using it anywhere, so it's just sitting in a platform there. So they just decided to, yes, we'll just remove that, and yeah, most of them are happy with that.
Or in
Um,
some cases, it's not even sitting there, right? It's fractionally or zero
yeah,
fraction reserved.
Yeah, so they also do aggregation, which means, they hold your funds in another international exchange, for example. For example, there's an exchange in India, I don't want to name names, but so they just hold all the funds in Binance. So all their accounts are shown in
Nice.
India, right? That your balance exists as this. But yeah, the entire collective is held in Binance. So yeah, so that's how it has turned out here. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that other places it doesn't happen the same way. But yeah, even regulations pushed exchanges to kind of go towards that direction because they just made it so hard for the exchanges to report every single transaction that comes in and out of like a custodial wallet. That they just decided, no, we're not going to do that. Our expenses are going to go up, so we just turn it off. And yeah, people are happy with that. They are hodling in a custodial exchange, um, without the ability to withdraw their crypto. And once it's ready, once the price has gone up, they just sell it and then withdraw the rupees. So yeah, I would say that's not really a good thing.
Yeah, that's horrible. I guess then you would have to differentiate between um, centralized custodial services holding or not holding versus individuals holding. Yeah, those are two very different things, right? Like, as much as I don't really think hodling is such a great approach to things, at least individuals holding is like you can kind of get the niceness of it, right? Like, yeah, okay, they believe in it. All right, cool. But yeah, just people holding on Robinhood or an exchange or whatever, and then the
Mhm.
exchange may or may not even have the crypto. That's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't even it doesn't even count for anything, right?
Yeah, you'll only get the enthusiasts then. Only they will be holding it in a non-custodial wallet. The rest
Right.
of them, like if you want to get the rest who are not really, their day-to-day basis is not crypto, if you want them to actually use a non-custodial platform, it has to be usable, or else it just doesn't work out that way.
When a merchant accepts BCH, it is doing DCA, right? It's doing cost averaging. Isn't that kind of the
Yeah.
first line of benefits before you even think about hedging and stuff like that?
Well, the merchants who are accepting have never even thought about dollar cost averaging unless they happen to also be traders, right? Like, assuming they're not traders, they've never even heard the phrase dollar cost averaging and so
Mhm.
forth. So for them, even that is like, what are you talking about? I'm not a trader. Please don't. Oh my God, why do I have to think about this? Right?
But
It's like
but
an
but
extra
Yeah, but
layer.
that's what we
they
agree,
are
right?
doing that, in fact, by always accepting payments at whatever price. They are in fact doing cost average,
Yeah,
cost
yeah, they
averaging.
definitely are. They
Mhm.
are. I just meant as far as like that being a good thing from there. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying, Bruno. I'm sorry.
No, because just what Jomar said, like if you are accepting payment regularly with frequency, you are doing dollar cost averaging, even if you don't know what it is.
Yeah,
And that over
Yeah.
time seems to be like, advantageous.
yeah, because in
I
fact,
Even
would
before,
disagree. I
it
would
it
disagree because the general crypto cycles, if you just generally see that on a longer time frame, right, the prices tend to go up very quickly, but then they keep going down slowly, right, over a long period of time, like at least few months or so, it keeps going down. So if a merchant is constantly like accepting, again, I'm assuming that they need the funds to be able to replace, right? So most of the time they might be selling at a loss in order to purchase more products or whatever it is.
Unless they hold it long enough that they go
Yes,
through one of
long
those
enough.
spikes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, and that's something that people don't really want to think about. And of course, the same is also true for the U.S. dollar. Your dollar cost averaging by accepting U.S. dollar or local currency also. It's there's no such thing as no risk. It's like this guy on Twitter recently who posted he reordered from Amazon the same thing that he ordered like what was it a few years ago, and it was like 4x the price. So yeah, if you're accepting in dollars, you're also dollar cost averaging, right? You're
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
not
Well, I
dollar
mean,
cost, but you're cost averaging, you're real cost averaging.
that's why you only keep you keep a reasonable pool of dollars, and then your dollar is constantly turning around, and you use it to buy inventory and stuff, right? I think that fits back into what Robert was saying, that you need the coins to be turning around and be useful in buying inventory and other things one way or another.
Yeah.
So they don't
All
need to
right.
think about dollar cost averaging or strategies.
Right. They don't need to think about it. But you're right, Bruno. They are doing it. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Anything, any asset, including fiat that you hold, you're also cost averaging versus some universal reality. Um, the Big Mac index, for example. So wait, let me go back to the metrics. Let's try to bring this back to metrics. So Jomar, Ramit, like, do you guys have any particular metrics that you use, or could we discuss like how you think we should measure all of these things we've talked about: the demand, the supply, the image, the awareness, perception, user experience, convenience? Do you guys have any kind of metrics for those, or have any recommendations? Because I mean, I think an obvious conclusion to all of this, right, is that any single metric is ridiculous on its own, because, like you name
Yeah.
said, it just becomes something that you game, and it's not really
Mm.
meaningful. But a bunch of these things together starts to become pretty meaningful. So, do you guys have any recommendations for specific metrics?
Yeah. Of course, we are we are tracking a lot of metrics. The most basic is of course like the number of users, so the new wallets being created and number of transactions that goes through the wallet. Um, but for us, this is more like these are minor metrics. For me, the more important metrics are the number of orders in our marketplace. So that's for me a more important metric, and the basket size of the order, the fee that we collect from each order, and yeah, it's more about measuring the revenue and profitability for that's specific for the company for Paytaka. Um, but it's if I don't know how we can extrapolate that to like BCH in general. Maybe yeah, it's difficult to yeah, come up
Uh,
with like yeah,
no, I
set
think
of
that's
metrics.
great. And oh man, I'll have something to say after this also. Yeah, because
Yeah, yeah,
that's exactly what I see. How about for Zapit? You guys have, or sorry,
Yeah.
Jomar, did you guys have additional metrics that you're looking at? So users, transactions,
yeah.
marketplace
The
orders,
number of
basket size of marketplace
merchants.
orders,
Yeah, yeah,
revenue and
the
profitability. Your last point was revenue and profitability, right? Yeah,
yeah. For us, I think that's the most important because that spells sustainability for the company. If we can
exactly.
reach good numbers in terms of revenue and profit, then the company can survive for a much longer time and
Right,
serve more value to the community.
right. Okay, yeah. Ramit, sorry.
Sure, yeah. I would agree with Jomar on most of the points that he mentioned. I think we are also tracking very similar set of metrics. But apart from that, I think our main metric that we are focusing on is how well our incentive is working. This is, going back to the point that I mentioned that there isn't enough incentive out there to actually use BCH, right? So that is what we have been working on. We are working on an idea where we incentivize users to actually use BTH in their day-to-day life for payments and more. So I would say we are still like we are 95% done with that entire loop. So we are building like a closed loop system where our token, that's where it plays in the ZRP token. Again, it's not a token like any other platform out there. We don't necessarily sell our token, right? It's given out as reward points. So you're actually getting an incentive to use the platform. Like whenever you make a BCH payment, you actually get a token as a reward. Or let's say you provide liquidity for our P2P exchange, you get a reward. Now, what can you actually do with that reward? What can you actually do with that token? What we're building right now is a discount system. So when you actually go to a store and make a payment, compared to any other app out there, if you actually use Zapit to pay with BCH, you can actually redeem your ZRP tokens to get a discount on your payment. And that's going to be market driven discount. I don't think we have ever seen that in any other platform. Most of the platforms tend to burn their own marketing funds to do that. But we are working on an idea where the discounts are going to be market driven. So as long as we are able to create these streams of demand for ZRP with various methods that we have within the platform, so that will actually replace the funds that is required for providing the discounts from, for example, like decks like Cauldron or something like that. So that is a huge thing that we are actually going to be start to measure. I think that will play a huge role for us.
Dude, I'm super interested. Do you already have a specific idea of what those metrics will be, of how well the incentive is working? Like, is that from the user's
Yes, well,
perspective or
transactions.
the merchant's perspective, or?
Yes, so of course, we have had our hand on the merchant side of things, right? Like we have tried few things. A few things didn't work out because of regulations, and a few things didn't work out because of the other problems that we just spoke of before this, right? So all those points that we mentioned before get fixed when we try to do this. For example, how do we fix demand? By providing an incentive, as I said. I'll just give an example, right? So there is similar to Venmo or Cash App or something like that. We have similar payment applications in India. So let's say you're purchasing a product for $10, right? You're paying $10 with that application to purchase the product. But the idea from Zapid's point of view is that, hey, if you have been using Zapid, and if you continue using Zapid for all the things that we have, you're eventually going to start accumulating those reward points, right? So you're going to start getting the tokens, which you can then use to actually receive a discount on for in your future payments that you're going to make. So that's our play there, is that there is an incentive to switch to Zapid compared to any other payment application out there. So those transactions is a huge metric for us. So the on-chain transaction that we're going to be making for redemption of the rewards, I think that's a huge metric for us. That would actually give us good adoption metrics, because then we will know that yes, users are actually interested in receiving an incentive to start using BCH.
Perfect.
I,
Yeah.
I find it interesting how Zapit and Paytaka are approaching the same problem but coming up with different solutions. Uh, Partly because we have very different, we operate on different geographic location and very different circumstances. I totally get the idea that Romit is explaining, like the incentives, like I understand why that they came up with such a solution. For Paytaka, we don't call it incentives. What we are working out is like creating platforms that reduce the cost of the prices of goods. Like in our marketplace, it's 20% cheaper than competitors. So what in our language we say we provide value through these savings that our customers can get. But it's essentially solving the same demand side problem. Like if you provide incentive in the case of Zapit, or if you provide savings in the case of Paytaka, you solve the demand side of this. And yeah, it's interesting to me how we come up with these different approaches to the same
But
problem.
Jomar, I didn't understand what you mean by saving. How are you? I mean, what part of it do you mean by saving?
Um, because for example, in our marketplace, in fact, our marketplace is, at least as it is now, is competing against food delivery apps. So
Correct.
the merchants, most especially the restaurants that we have onboarded, they're able to sell in our marketplace, like the food, and then our users can select from their menu, put it in the cart, and have it delivered to their address. And because we are using Bitcoin Cash for the payment, so we don't have much overhead on the payments processing, we're able to uh, put a much lesser markup on the price. Where, for example, Food Panda is charging 30 to 40% markup, we just put 10% markup. So in effect, our users get at least 20% cheaper products. Yeah, they pay 20% less compared to competitors.
Okay, now I get the point. Okay, I understand.
Mm.
So I was just trying to compare with platforms in India, and okay, I got the difference there. So are you guys able to do this because there are either very less or no regulations right now on actually using Bitcoin Cash for payments?
Yes. So yeah,
Okay,
we are in a
right,
more favorable environment.
understood. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Here it's
So that's
very much
why,
favorable right now.
yeah, that's why I said we came up with different approaches because we are working on different environments, different locations. So it's a very different experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, the taxes are adding up to almost 50% in India now
Oh
for
yeah.
using crypto. So it's yeah, there's no way we can sell that directly, especially if
Right.
there's a conversion involved. I don't know if you guys are actually helping the merchants convert from BCH to fiat, if that's something that merchants are looking for. But I would assume that majority of them, yes, they would want at least a way to convert it to fiat, right?
In fact, majority of them want to hold the Bitcoin Cash.
Ah,
But
okay,
that's because probably, as has been mentioned earlier, that's probably because it's just a small percentage of their total sales. So when it becomes bigger, then probably it will be a different dynamics. But for now, volatility is not such of a big issue at the moment. So yeah.
right. Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah. So I guess that's why we have different approaches because yeah,
Mhm.
we generally cannot have the same approach because the taxes will kill us.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could have had Jason on here to discuss as well, or Noel, but it's like 1 a.m. for them, like it is for us in Asia, but they couldn't make it. So yeah, that's fantastic. I love having that. I'm taking notes on this, and I'm gonna post some of these notes about it. All right. So, you name, had you had any thoughts here as you were listening to these metrics, right? Because I'm trying to get back to the actual metrics question, like what are the actual metrics that you use? And so, okay, wait. Before I let you talk, I want to monologue for a minute. So, the one thing that Jomar mentioned for Paytaka was just the profit, revenue and profit. And for me, I think this is the answer. It's when there's people who are providing services and they're earning revenue and profit through the use of Bitcoin Cash, whether that's because of the unique properties of Bitcoin Cash or just because their users prefer to use it, whatever the case is, the amount of revenue and profit coming through for businesses, if I had to pick a single metric, that would be it. Would be how much are people making because they're allowing their users to use Bitcoin Cash. And this goes back to my assertion that the number of entrepreneurs who choose Bitcoin Cash or use Bitcoin Cash is maybe our most important metric. Anyway, that's my opinion. If I had to choose one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that this is, and I want to elaborate a bit further, that this is I mean, not to discount all the previous efforts, but this is a break from what we used to do, a few years, even just a few years ago, like pre 2020 and pre 2018. In that this is a much more down to earth and practical approach to measuring success, as opposed to people who would just want to grab something like, oh yeah, transaction count, yeah, let's pump transaction counts. And even before that, oh my god, we're fighting a folk war, yeah, people are looking at node counts, let's pump that node count, man, just trying to grab something cheap and try to pump it.
Oh my god.
um and I think we are slowly but surely fostering a new generation of entrepreneurs who are very practical, and are willing to say the quiet part out loud, that in that, okay, yeah, the metrics are good, but ultimately I want to make money, and I want to make money on Bitcoin Cash. And if I would try this, I would try it this way, and if it doesn't work, I will try it the other way. And I think that is a very healthy approach that would yield a lot of potential down the road. And that that is encouraging. Ultimately, all the adoption should converge in your business becoming sustainable and growing, right? So yeah,
Oh yeah,
that's my take.
and being convenient and useful for the customers as well. Of
Yes.
course, those are the same thing fundamentally.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
let's
I
wrap
ask?
up.
Can I ask one
Oh yeah, yeah,
question?
go for it.
About the peer-to-peer exchange, both Zapit and Paytaka have peer-to-peer exchange, and I guess very interesting metrics are coming out of this if they can talk about it.
Uh, for me, yeah, I think that's one of the things that we would like to see growth, like the activity in the P2P exchange. For us, it's a secondary aspect. The P2P exchange is there to facilitate the on and off ramp. So ultimately, we want a higher velocity of Bitcoin Cash and fiat exchange for the purpose of encouraging purchase in our marketplace. So in the end, we still go with the revenue and profit measure. But indeed, that's one of the areas where we want to see growth, the amount of usage in the P2P exchange.
Yeah, I think almost the same thing. We are also, treating the P2P exchange, although it's one of our main revenue generators at the moment for Zapit. It is still a, available method for on ramping and off ramping for our users. In terms of metrics alone, yeah, I think we are doing quite well compared to last year when we launched. Of course, as usual, we have been growing over time. We have offers from multiple countries. Yes, there are some disputes that happen here and there, but I think that's pretty common. Sometimes someone's trying to scam you because they think they can get away with it. That does happen, but I think it's a very
Oh,
less percentage.
it's not just something that can happen as it picks up. You will get a lot of them, and you should be very prepared for them.
Yeah, yes,
This is
definitely.
speaking from a from an enthusiast veteran.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we are seeing a percentage of it for sure, but it's still a very small percentage compared to the actual successful trades that take place. Yeah, I think recently we announced that we crossed over $1 million worth of liquidity that's available on the exchange. That's a pretty big metric. It's a huge milestone for us. Not the last for sure. We are definitely trying to build, and yeah, our marketing efforts are definitely being fruitful. The incentives are also working. Um, yeah, there are a lot of things that we're working on currently as well to increase the adoption of our P2P exchange. Another thing that definitely helped is a lot of other P2P exchanges shutting down, creating like a void. Um, but yeah, I think right now Zapit and Paytech are the only non-custodial P2P exchanges right now, and both of them, funnily, both of them are supporting BCH. We of course have other chains as well, but we started off with BCH. There are no other platforms that are P2P and non-custodial. I think that's something that BCH can boast. BCH is the only chain that focuses completely on the non-custodial side of things. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good metric that we are seeing, and I think it'll only
1 million
continue to grow.
liquidity.
So
Shit! Congratulations, man. That's great.
yeah, thanks. We're looking, yeah, we would love to. We're working on getting more volume as well. So that'll come eventually, I guess. We would love for the BCH community out there to, place more offers on both. Do it on Paytaka and Zapit. Be there to provide liquidity for all the newcomers that are coming into BCH. I think that'll help the community grow as well. So yeah, I just wanted to say that out there.
Very cool. Okay, thank you.
One more thing about this. Sorry, Emergent. I've seen on Telegram and even on X people speculating about you guys sharing liquidity. Is there any talks about this?
I think me and Jomar had discussed about this. Jomar, if you remember,
Yeah, I'm
we
open
had a
to that.
call. I think we did discuss about this. I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen uh, how similar are our contracts, like the P2P escrow contracts. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to that, but I think discussions about it or like delving into details at this point is a bit premature.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we are ready, I'm open to.
Yeah, we are open to that as well. And
Mm,
another thing that we are parallelly working on is actually opening up the arbitration to, like dispute arbitration.
mm,
So that would render the P2P exchange completely decentralized. Right now, the centralizing factor is the arbitration, the dispute management. So we are working on having that as well, so that whoever is actually picking up that order to become the arbiter, they would actually get the percentage of fees that the users are paying for that order. So there is an incentive to actually become an arbitrator. So there will be a marketplace for that, is what I'm hoping in the future. But yeah, let's
mm.
say we are open to that as well.
Yeah, talking about on ramps, I'd like to share something about um, we're getting feedback from users because aside from the P2P exchange, we have introduced our vending machine where people can buy BCH from the machine, and actually more and more users are finding it easier. Like they would prefer to go to the machine to cash in, to buy Bitcoin Cash instead of going through the P2P exchange. So we are uh, we are exploring on how we can scale up the production of these machines. And recently we had some talks with the Department of Science and Technology here, the regional office. Like they are willing to fund the equipment that we will need to scale up the production, like maybe a 3D printer or something like that. Um, yeah, so we might, as we move forward, also expand on this along with the P2P exchange. Everything that we can do to make on ramp and off ramp a lot easier for our users.
Oh man, this is some hidden history that we've never talked about probably, but uh, onboarding to BCH through some kind of card or vending machine type setup was one of the original main ideas of general protocols when we were trying to
Oh,
decide how to do things. But yeah, with regulations in the places where we live and work, made it absolutely impossible. So
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
so happy for you guys that you can make that work. Yeah, other places are ridiculous.
Last time somebody tried that in India, they got arrested. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
uh-oh.
gonna stay away from that.
exactly.
They
Last
set
time
up an
I
ATM machine, and then yeah, the next day, the police came and picked them up.
Right.
So
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not gonna try that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so fortunately, it's a better environment here so far. We checked with our legal counsel about it. They said that as long as it's one way, so it's only cash in. You're only allowed to buy
Buying the
Bitcoin Cash in
thing.
the machine.
Yeah.
So as long as it's one way, we don't have anything to worry.
That's great. Fuck, that's fantastic. I'm glad that that's working for you, and I would love to see that in action. I'm totally gonna visit just so I can buy some from the vending machine. I'm gonna sell my Bitcoin Cash to buy rupee or not to buy rupees, to buy a pesos, and
Pesos.
then I'm gonna
Yeah.
go there and use the pesos to buy the Bitcoin Cash back, and I'm gonna be happy about it. That's
Yeah.
great. All right, yeah, we should wrap up. We've gone on for quite a bit, and I'm sure we could talk for longer. But to wrap up, let me ask you guys, and I'll try to do it myself also, to say if you had to pick like a small basket of metrics that you think are okay, one thing is for your company, but let's talk about BCH as a whole. What are the metrics that are meaningful, or no, you can do it for your company and for BCH as a whole. What are the metrics, the small basket of metrics that you think are meaningful, the most meaningful ones to measure for adoption? Anybody have a quick, already have that on top of your mind? I could go first probably if you want.
Yeah, total revenue of all Bitcoin Cash focused companies. That would be a good metric. Basket of metrics. Okay, so yeah, revenue, profit, and then users, number of users, and number of merchants that accept Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I guess I
So
would
total profit,
go the same
revenue,
line.
and then number of users, number of merchants.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to say something?
Yeah, Romit was saying
Yeah, I
something.
would. Yeah, I was gonna just say that I agree with most of the points there. But yeah, definitely resources. I would add to resources. Um, to get to know more about uh, you know the importance of BCH and how actually to build a business on BCH. That I think we're lacking on that as well.
So that's like the education awareness type
Education, yeah,
resources. Is that what
Yeah.
you mean?
yes, education.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yeah.
I'm taking
Because
notes.
I recently I did give a talk about how to build on BCH, and that was one of the main things that came up. Is that we didn't even know that this existed. We didn't know that we could build all these things on BCH. So I
Right.
think
That's part of that is the reason why General Protocols and Cheap Lightning, who's on the stream here, we got together and made that discover.cash site, right? Because
Mhm.
like it's you want to be able to give somebody a simple introduction where they look at it and they're like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, that's great. I'm interested in that. So yeah, but then locally and culturally, right? Like that's different from place to place.
Yeah, I got the guy from A Fifth of Gaming to change the site he had before for the Discover.cash one. Pretty good.
What's your basket, Bruno? What's your list?
List of metrics. Oh, profit and loss is the main one, right? But I'm not a business like Paytaka and Zapit. I'm just one guy using Bitcoin Cash as much as I can and trying to get other people to do it.
Well, this is the
So
great thing about BCH. It's like it's actually one of the very few, like maybe like one, two, or three, like actually decentralized cryptocurrencies where it's everybody doing their own thing. So yeah, there's nothing separating you from anybody else. So that's great. So profit, like the profit that you earn or the profit that anybody is earning from using BCH. Is that what you mean?
yeah, like for example, the things I use is like I have a brother who lives in Australia, so to send money to him and vice versa. To use BCH Pool to one of the things I'm trying to push recently is the BitGree. Like we can use BitGree to take Amazon's money, so let's do that. So things like this, pretty much.
That's great. You have one?
Yeah. So, since you guys had a lot of great ideas, including but not limited to the very, yeah, I mentioned very practical profitability metric. I just want to say something that might not be immediately practical, but it could be a nice wrap up that goes back to our the roots of BCH. So imagine if we have a professional team conducting this survey, and we can pick 100 or 1,000 random people from around the globe, and we can do this every year, and we give each of them like zero point 0.1 BCH and say, um, do whatever you like with this BCH that we drop to you, and we present them with a reasonable array of options that's available at that time. Both local and then online and global and so on. We can maybe observe how many of them immediately drop the BCH to their local exchange to get rid of it. Hopefully, the process is streamlined, and we can also observe how many of them take their BCH to do something else, and put them into one sort of circulation or another. And I believe that as time goes on, the more people who choose to do the latter over time, to choose to circulate their BCH one way or another, not because they are forced to do so. Like maybe there are places where exchanges are not available. Hopefully, they are available everywhere. But because they find it practical and useful to use their BCH for a variety of other reasons. I think that would be my idealized form of measuring adoption. That is, of course, not very practical to do on a day-to-day basis right now, but perhaps someday in the future.
It's like the old TV tests where they like randomly
Yeah.
choose people and just watch what they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's a good one. We'll just do a Monte Carlo like every year. Just choose random people, make them make a wallet, give them money, see what happens.
Yep.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. I don't know how to phrase that one. I'm gonna have to think about how to type that one up here. I'm writing the notes here. All right,
Large focus group or something like that.
Yeah, focus group. Yeah, focus group, like observed focus group. Yeah. All right, so I'll wrap up with mine. So mine, if I had to choose just a single one, of course, all the other ones we've mentioned are great. So my metric is just the number of people who find BCH useful. And each person is going to find their own way that it's useful, whether they're an entrepreneur or a consumer or an investor or whatever it is they're doing with it. So it's very hard to measure, right? Like real individuals. That's a very hard thing to measure, globally difficult thing to measure. But if I had to choose a metric, I would say the number of people who find BCH useful. I want that to go up because that's where network effects are born. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been really good to talk with you guys. I appreciate you guys joining. And we'll have this all recorded and put out there, and we'll start extracting shorts from it as well. So thank you so much for your time. Bruno, thanks for joining us. It was good to talk to you. And Jomar, thanks also. Ramit, of course. It's very good to talk to you guys. Any last words you guys wanted to say before we wrap up?
Well, I would just like you to comment briefly on your experience in Townsville, because over there, I bet you feel what adoption is.
Yeah, I can explain that. I said I was going to explain that, and I didn't. So we went to Townsville just to work for, I think it was 2 weeks. I don't remember how long it was, but General Protocols was like, we're fully remote. We have literally someone on every continent except Antarctica. So we're just spread all over the world, and we work completely remotely all the time, completely asynchronous. And so occasionally it's nice to get together and focus on something and actually be in the same place and get to hang out and talk. So we chose Townsville for that. So we went to Townsville and we stayed there for 2 weeks. And I think from all of us, or most of us at least, we paid for travel. So our travel there was paid in BCH. Once we got there, there's a taxi. So we could pay for a taxi if you get the right one, taxi to go places. And then you can rent a car. I think there's rental car. I don't remember. I think Jonathan rented the car. I don't remember if he did it in BCH or not. But then the place that we stayed was the hotel that we stayed at was was also paid in BCH. So we stayed there and we paid for the whole time in BCH. And then we went out every day, because we're just having a good time. So of course, sometimes we we went to the grocery, and there's a grocery where you can buy your groceries in BCH. So we had a place that had like a kitchen and a fridge and a kitchen, like cooking area and everything. So we had that. So we did go and buy groceries in BCH. To do stuff at home, but then we also like spending it out. So we would go out, and there's a significant number of cafes, restaurants, and markets that we could just go to. And we go there, we paid in BCH, and we more or less spent the whole 2 weeks spending only BCH. There were a few exceptions to it, like the scooters that we rented were only there's like a national or maybe an international company, and so their payment network doesn't support BCH, so we weren't able to use that for that. But for the most part, we did absolutely everything in BCH, and and of course we had to pick and choose because it's not like the whole town is accepting BCH, but there was a lot of places that you could go and a lot of variety of places that you could go. So yeah, we did, and we went to some events. So they had some late night events where, there's everybody outside and have a good time talking, drinking beers, having ice cream that's paid in BCH and so forth, pizza. We had a really good time. We used BCH the whole time we were there. It was fantastic. It's good to have that experience, and then after you've done that once, it's really hard to go back to fiat.
What about business to business transaction? Like, did you ask that bakery if its supplier was paid with BCH, stuff like that?
I think that's the only way it works. Yeah, if they weren't using it themselves, like they receive it and then they go use it somewhere else, either their supplier or the other direction, they're spending it to consume. I don't think it would work, right? So the circular economy is just, I mean, we call it circular economies, but economies are circular. So it just means economy. Yeah. So there's some amount of economy that's developed there because of this kind of relentless push that they have made to get people to accept BCH and then spend their BCH at other places. So yeah, there's definitely a significant amount of that going on. I don't know how to measure it, but there it is going on there. Yeah, good question. Sorry, I had forgotten to explain that. All right, yeah, so I forget if I said already, but my single metric would be the number of people who find BCH useful. All right, anybody else have last words? Ramit, did you have anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I guess just up it. Uh, check out the app and provide liquidity. This message is mostly for the BCH community and help every single person that we are trying to onboard. By providing liquidity, we give the option for them to actually be onboarded via a non-custodial platform. So yeah, that would be my
Oh
point.
yeah. Okay, and where should they go to get Zapit and read about it?
Zapit.io would be the best place. All the other
Zapit.io.
links are available there. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Zapit.io. Jomar, anything you want to wrap up with?
World domination.
All right.
I
We're on
always
it.
mentioned it with Bruno when we discuss, when we chat. We aim for world domination. We can do
Oh
this,
yeah.
guys.
Yeah. The most positive and constructive world domination there's ever been. And where can people go to find out about Paytaka? We've been talking a lot about Paytaka, but we haven't said.
Yeah. So you can download Paytaka. It's in Google Play, App Store, and we have the Chrome extension as well. And yeah, so we are continually improving the wallet. The upcoming release 0.19 has a number of interesting features. Yeah, so we are releasing it in the coming weeks. So
Okay,
watch out
great.
for it.
So go search for Paytaka, Paytaca.
Go to
Excellent.
map.paytaka.com.
Oh yeah,
There you
I
go.
haven't mentioned that. Yeah, so we have a map of all the merchants that we have onboarded, and there's a timestamp for the last transaction. Yeah. so you can see which
that's
merchant.
good. So you can
Yeah,
see the recency of merchants. Perfect.
yeah, and it's ordered so when the most recent transaction, the most recent transaction is at the top of the listing. So yeah, it's interesting. It's yeah.
I look forward to the merchants gaming that metric.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody
They're
buy
free to do
something
that.
quick. Somebody buy something.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great.
That would be a good. If it happens, it means that there are probably a lot of people looking at the map, and it's a way to
Exactly.
advertise themselves is to
Exactly.
transact.
I look
Yeah,
forward to having to worry about what's it called? Goodhart's Law. I look forward to having to worry about Goodhart's Law.
yeah. In this case, yes, that would be
Oh
nice
yeah,
to see.
that's great. All right. And also for us, of course, please check out bchbull.com. It is a volatility solution, but also the other flip side of that coin is it's for speculators who want to do the investment side. So please go check it out, whether you're looking for stability or whether you want to speculate. All right. You name any wrapping up comments?
No, I'm just happy to hear all this lively discussion.
Hell yeah. Okay, thank you guys. It was really great to talk to you. And I've put up a list of discussion points as we were going through them on Twitter on this thread. And at the end, I put a summary of the quick basket of metrics from each of us, from Jomar, from Ramit, from Bruno, you name, and myself. So you might want to go check that and make sure I didn't misrepresent you. But thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will talk with you again. Talk with you next time. Take care, everybody.